Hi guys. In math this week, we're going to start a new unit. So our new unit is on fractions. So I've given you guys a little bit of information on fractions, and there's a little bit of work to do with it today. Let's start off with going over the information. So a fraction is what you get when you divide a whole into equal parts. So a whole something, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be a whole pie or a whole pizza, or it could be a classroom, whatever. A whole something being split into equal parts means that we're dealing with fractions. Each part is what we would call a fraction of the whole. So, for example, if I take this whole rectangle right here, so I've got a rectangle and it's just in one piece as we speak right now. Now, if I divide it into 3 equal parts, if I take that and I split it here and here, you'll see that this part is the same as this part, is the same as this part. Each one of those parts is what we would call a third. It's 1 out of 3 parts, right? So this is 1/3, and this is 1/3, and this is 1/3. Each of them is 1/3 of the rectangle. Now, if I'm looking at more than one of the pieces, I would put more numbers on top. So, for example, if I have 2 of those pieces, that's 2 out of the 3, or 2/3. Lastly, in fact, I can look at all the pieces and still call it a fraction. So if I'm looking at all these pieces, that's like 3/3, or it's like 1 whole. 3/3 is the same thing as 1 whole. All right? So those are kind of like the basics of a fraction. Now, when we're dealing with fractions, we need to look at a few important words. So what do we call the parts of a fraction? So the top number in a fraction is called the numerator. It tells us how many parts we're looking at. Whatever we want to pick out, that's our numerator. Typically, we do it by shading. We say, okay, well, what's the shaded part? But it doesn't have to be that. We could look at unshaded parts, or if we had different colors, we could look at, all the blue parts or something like that, right? So the parts we're looking at is what we put on top, and that's called the numerator. The bottom number is called the denominator. It tells us the total number of parts a whole is divided into. Okay? I remember these. I have the N on top and the D on the bottom. The way I remember this is that D, denominator starts with D, and D is the first letter of down. So the denominator is down. How I always keep it straight. The line that goes between the numerator and denominator is called the fraction line, or the fraction bar, although it's sometimes called a division line or a division bar if we're using it to demonstrate division. And so you guys may have noticed when I was giving back some of your dividing stuff, I would say, well, if you have 12 divided by 4, I would write it like that, right? So it's another way of showing division. We could also show it this way, 12 divided by 4. In this case, we're using it to show fractions. Here's an example. So just like I had on the first page, this is 1/3. So for this picture, we're looking at one shaded part of the whole rectangle. So the 1 is the numerator. 3 is the total parts of the fraction that it's that the whole is divided into. So 3 is the denominator. It's 1 out of these 3 parts. So 1/3. Very important to remember that fractions need to be equal parts, right? If the parts aren't equal, then the fraction is not accurate. So I gave you guys a rectangle that's divided into 3 equal parts. That's 1/3. That's correct. In this case, I didn't divide them into equal parts, so this is not 1/3. Even though it's 1 out of 3 pieces, it's not 1 out of 3 equal pieces. So important to remember that. One more note I wanted to bring to mind, guys, was that fractions can be shown with a horizontal fraction line, like 1/3, like this, or it can be shown with a diagonal fraction line, so it's like 1/3. So either of those can show fractions, and they're equally valid. So for the work I gave you guys, I've just given you some fractions, just some pictures of a fraction, and I want you to tell me what the fraction shows as far as what is shaded in. I want you to tell me which number is the numerator and which one is the denominator. So I'm just going to look at this first one with you, and then I'll give you guys time to do the rest. So the first one here, we have a circle, and it's divided into 2 equal pieces, and one of them is shaded in. So that would be 1/2, or 1 out of 2. The numerator is the part that we were looking at, this shaded part. There's one of those. The denominator is the total amount of parts that it's broken into. It's broken into 2 pieces, so that means that the denominator is 2. So in this case, our fraction kind of looks like this 1/2 this way, or the 1/2 this way. Both are fine. All right, I'll give you guys some time to work on the rest of them. When you're done, you can check back, and I'll do a quick review video. All right, thanks, guys.